Okay, so it's important to get married, to start a family, to have a family. Did you say it's an obligation?
We're talking about the marriage.
So what does that of Islam mean? It means that when you're married?
No, it's not that when you are married you are already a Muslim. But when you are married, there are stages. It's a big step. Yeah, the lady gives when you are married to an Islam, a girl, normal, but never touched by a boy, all that.
In Islam, you can't marry a boy.
The first one to have a relationship with her was you. That's who.
If you're a boy, if you have a relationship with a girl, do you have to marry her?
No, that's not it. If you want to marry a girl in Islam, madam, she mustn't have had a relationship with a boy.
So the woman has to be virgin.
Yes, she must never ever have had sexual relationship with a boy.